Okay, start any time with the dog.
Starting now?
Sure.
All right.
You're
So,
on.
quick show of hands just to begin. Who here would be comfortable killing this dog? Is there anyone who would be comfortable killing this dog right now? It's very small and very innocent. So right now we're about to make a decision. We're going to ask you to make a decision. And depending on the outcome of your decision, you have the choice to save or kill 42 million dogs. Because that's how many dogs reside in the American Southeast. The American Southeast, in case you're unfamiliar, is a few states ranging from just east of Texas to the coast. And if you do not choose to help protect these states, you will be dealing with 42 million dead dogs, a refugee crisis, and the collapse of the entire American economy. So here's a look at the states we're talking about today. Braden's going to talk a little bit about what's been going on in these states since the year 2000.
These states have seen an increase in more tropical storms and deadly natural disasters in the past 2 decades than any other region in the United States. You can see the total death tolls, especially from events like Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Ivan and Rita, have been devastating for this region of the United States. And it's not just the numbers of people who have lost their lives in these incidences, but the occurrences. You look at years like 2004, 2005, and most recently 2016, and the magnitude and frequency of these events is increasing more than it has in any decade previous in the American Southeast.
All right, so just a quick look at this graph. It's pretty much, you can see that the number of disasters is just going up. There's an upward trend just as time goes on. The cost is going up, the number of events is going up. So what we did was we compared the numbers by decade, except for this current last 6 years. And if you look at 2000 to 2009 versus 1990 to 99, you can see that there's almost double the number of natural disasters on there. And looking at the cost, there's about a $300 billion increase in losses. And just a more important fact is also that those numbers are adjusted for inflation, so they're pretty equaled out. And already in these last 6 years, we've already had 30 disasters, close to the number of 33 we've had in the entire last decade, and already with 140 billion lost. And this is just the beginning. Those disasters that we used for the numbers there, that was just counting droughts, severe storms, cyclones, and wildfires, which mostly predominantly affect the southeastern region. All right, so in these last 6 years, the cost of natural disasters is already 122% more than 1980 to 89. And on average, there's been about 12 billion lost per event this last decade. And where's part of this going? The taxpayers. You don't want to pay for that. And then if the trends continue, this decade is going to see at least 8 droughts because there is a predicted average increase of 2 degrees Fahrenheit per year in the region. And also forecasters shown that precipitation is going to basically just drop off in the more southern region, and that's going to be more dry, leading to more droughts. And then in the last decade, there's been a 67% increase in the number of droughts. And if we continue this trend, we're going to see at least 8 this next decade. Another thing's big economic impact on this. So sea levels are currently rising about projected 4 feet this next century, and Highway 1 is also sinking. So the Louisiana State Highway connects one of the major ports to the rest of the nation. And if that sinks, there's going to be no more access to ports, no more access to at least the Gulf region's natural gas and oil. Therefore, you don't want to use more foreign oil, no more exports here. And also, just closing the highway down for 90 days is going to cost at least $7.8 billion in losses, and that's only for 90 days by flooding. Another big thing is there's going to be a projected cost of $23 billion in losses by 2030 from hurricanes, and this is just with a 3% increase in wind speeds and 6 inches in sea level rise, which is going to happen pretty rapidly. And that's more than the state operating budgets of just 3 states in the region: Mississippi, Georgia, and West Virginia. Thanks, climate change.
So Sherman's hit on something really important, which is that these are not random occurrences. This is not like random incidences of flooding and hurricanes and droughts. This is statistically significant, and as these graphs showed, these numbers are only going to be increasing. So these issues we've seen before are just going to become more severe, more frequent, and then more varied because we have things ranging from hurricanes to droughts to flooding.
So if you've paid attention to anything in the past 2 decades, you probably remember 2005's Hurricane Katrina, which was a massive storm that hit the American Southeast and nearly destroyed all of New Orleans and the surrounding area. If we don't do something in advance about these problems, we're going to have incidences like Katrina again and again and again. And because of the way that climate change is happening now, it's here and it's increasing, we're going to see the frequency and magnitude of these events increase exponentially. Let's take a look at some of the social implications that came about because of Hurricane Katrina. As we could see in the previous slide, entire neighborhoods were flooded. When you don't have anywhere to live, where do you go? You go to the streets. When you have a family that you need to feed and you don't have anywhere to live or any money to buy that food with, what do? You break into a grocery store and you steal food for your family, what some people would call looting. What do you do when you have a starving family, no place to live and no place to work? All because the government didn't have the foresight or care to do anything in advance about this problem? You riot. In the face of physical destruction like this, I think the last thing that the government needs is rioting as well. And I just want to stress that this is because of climate change, as Hannah stated. It's not going anywhere, and in fact, it's getting worse. We're going to have instances in the American Southeast that are immensely more destructive than Hurricane Katrina if we don't do something about it in advance, which we can. There are solutions, there are mitigations, which we're going to cover very shortly.
So in 2005, Hurricane Katrina cost $250 in economic losses. And that's cost more than half of the state operating budgets of all the states in the American Southeast. So imagine with the increase in frequency and magnitude of all these events related to global climate change, how exponentially more of an increase it's going to cost the entire U.S.
And just to emphasize on that $250 billion in losses because of Hurricane Katrina, that's not just what the government paid to deal with that disaster, that's the cost to the American economy in recovering from this event. So instances like this have massive effects beyond just the region impacted. There's the social impacts that Madeline talked about, but there's also that economic hit that the entire country takes.
Yeah, so this could be a disaster for the entire U.S., not just our region, because our region has various industries that affect the entire U.S. economy, and taking down the southeastern regions could lead to disaster for the entire U.S. So two of the top industries in Florida alone, tourism brings in $67 billion a year as of 2011, accounting for 87 million tourists visiting the area each year. So it's a huge, huge revenues, and as the magnitude and frequency